Good afternoon, everybody. It's my pleasure to introduce Pasi Sahlberg. And as we know, he's an educator from Finland and a scholar. He's worked as a school teacher, teacher educator, and policy advisor in Finland, and has analyzed education systems and reforms around the world. His expertise includes international education policies, educational change, the future of schooling, and classroom teaching and learning. And his bestseller book, which you've seen, Finnish Lessons, What Can the World Learn from Educational Change in Finland, won the 2013 Grawemeyer Award. And he is currently the Director General of the National Center for International Mobility and Cooperation at the Finnish Ministry of Education and Culture in Helsinki. And I'm not going to read everything in here because you can do that yourselves. But when I spoke with Pasi this afternoon, he did tell me that he's going to be spending 2 years at Harvard, effective of January of this coming year. So that's neat to know. And I also, of course, wanted to remark on his fashion sense. And we've seen him with his wonderful reddish pink shoes that we're so impressed with. So I introduce you now to Pasi Sahlberg.
I want to stand here, ladies and gentlemen, so that you can see my beautiful shoes. Do I have a microphone? Can I have a mic here? But I want to start this my 60 minutes here by wishing all the teachers a wonderful World Teachers Day that we celebrate around the world just today, 5th of October. And I know that there are some of you are teachers like myself, so let's always remember how important work they do, particularly on a day like this. Then I also need the remote, maybe it's coming. Good. It's wonderful to be here, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do. In the first half of my talk, I'm going to speak a little bit about Finland for those who have been there but don't remember everything, which sometimes happens. And in the second half of my talk, I will say a few things about how Finland sits in the global context. In other words, how education policies and education thinking corresponds to those of things that you can find in the rest of the world. And in the third half of my talk, we have 3 math teachers in the room. I know you. I'll conclude some of the things that I think are relevant for the question of what could be behind the Finnish educational performance. All right, so those of you who are in the Twitter business, there's my Twitter account here. So I'm tweeting a lot of things that are happening in Finland in education all the time, but also globally. So if you're interested in seeing what the world is doing in education that I see, how I see it, that's over there. On my website, if you go there and you find the menu of Finnish lessons, you can find this presentation there as a PDF thing so that you can revisit some of these things over there. How many of you came to Finland before? Okay, almost everybody. Wonderful. Do you still remember some of the nice things you did? Yeah? You know, one of the things that, for those who have not had a privilege to be in Finland, one of the things that this is not working. One of the things I often ask people is that, so what do you think Finland is? What do you visualize when you think about the country? Now, when you be there, it's a little bit different things because you can recall back to your memories. Is the computer somewhere here, or where is it? Where's the keyboard?
Just on the other side of the podium.
Oh, over here, okay. All right. So, you know, this is one of the most common images that people have. That most people don't see anything when they think about Finland, because they don't know what the country is. But if you have a kind of an image, it's something like this. And probably many of you who came to Finland, you thought it's a cold country. There's always snow and ice there. And there are many people who come to me when I travel around the world and say that now I know why Finnish kids are doing so well in these international studies. It's because of the climate. But there's nothing else to do but learn and study and do your homework and go to school. No breaks, no recess, just a whole day in the school and do these things. But now when you be there, you know that it can be very, very different. This is another image. Somebody sent it to me the other day saying that when I think about Finland, I see something like this. And those of you, if you have a good Finnish friend, a friend in Finland, and I ask you to tell me something about this person, you probably say that my Finnish friend is somebody who doesn't really talk too much, that they're kind of a silent folks. And you know what? One of the things we hate is small talk. Yeah? I had a privilege to live here in Washington, D.C. for 5 years, but I'm all right now. and one of the difficult things for me was to learn to be with people and say something when you have absolutely nothing to say. You know that? You stand in a cocktail party and you have to talk to people you don't know, something that you don't know either yourself. But you learn to do this if you exercise a little bit. What I see in this image is exactly this: that Finns are, we don't say anything unless we think it's very important. And there is a story about these two Finnish guys who were very good friends in school. They went to university together, and then there was a long period when they didn't see one another, and by accident they met in Helsinki, and they were so happy about this reunion that they decided to go to a nearby restaurant and celebrate this reunion with a couple of drinks. So they had their first glasses of vodka but didn't say anything. The second glasses of vodka came and they drank them down, but no words were said. The same thing with the third one. When they had the fourth round of vodkas there, the other guy took the glass and said, "Kippis." And kippis means cheers in Finland. And the other fellow said that, "Did we come here to drink or to talk?" So, that's how Finland is. And then, those who know the country a little bit better, if you remember something from the media, you probably know that Finns do very kind of a strange, crazy things sometimes. This image is from the annual mobile phone throwing competition. And it's a world championships in a mobile phone throwing. It's held in a little city in a village actually in Finland, and thousands of people around the world go there every summer to compete how far they can throw a mobile phone. And previously we had a rule that you can choose any phone you want. There's a big bucket of mobile phones, except Nokia, because Nokia is for making a phone call back to your family and say that I won the race. But now, since Nokia is not Finnish anymore, we have changed the rules so that you have to use Nokia to throw this phone. But the point with these pictures is that if your images of Finland are something like this, it's always cold and dark outside, and people don't really talk too much unless they have something important to say, and they have very funny things in their culture, it's very difficult to understand why Finland is always in the headlines of the world media whenever education is discussed nowadays, that there must be something there, and many people say that there's a kind of a secret in the Finnish education. And those of you who have been in Finland, I hope that you understand that there's nothing like secret, there's nothing like miracle there. It's a very common sense of thinking how to make the system work and how to make the country, society work. Okay? Let me speak a little bit about what I think is important to keep in mind if anybody here would like to dig a little bit deeper in understanding how the education system works and why it works as it works. You may have seen some of these things before, but since I didn't have an opportunity to talk to all of you, this may be something that you haven't heard. But this is how the system looks like, and I think the key kind of a foundation of the Finnish education system is the idea that was created about 40 years ago in early 1970s, that we insist that all our children should go to the similar type of basic school. No streaming, no tracking, not really an alternatives to have charter schools or private schools. We have those a little bit, but they're under the control of the government. So government issues these charters and licenses to run independent public schools, but they are very few. We have about 75 schools in the entire country among the 3,000 public school network. And it's very, very difficult to have a license and operate a school in Finland. So that's a kind of a government policy to insist that everybody should go to a similar type of basic school. Children go to school when they are 7, and there's a preschool. Before that, that is optional. Almost everybody goes to the preschool. And before that, there's a daycare, universal daycare. And the difference between Finnish early childhood policy and many other countries is that we have issued in our law the right to the child for a daycare. So it's not the parent's right like in many other countries. It's a child's right to the daycare, and our education law also say that every child has a right to learn. I don't know any other country that stipulates in the legislation that every child has a right to learn, that is a children's right to learn. It's not the access that everybody have right to access to schools or education. It's a right to learn is a specific thing, okay? So the upper secondary, I'm not going to go into the details there, you pretty much know this, but we have an upper secondary system that is optional, where currently about 95% of our kids go. We would like everybody to go there, but 5% of them decide to do something else, and then about 60% will go to higher education. And this is all publicly paid, so we don't have any private education, because our constitution says that education in Finland is public. It's a little bit same as in France. That education is public. It means two things. One is that it's free of charge, it's a public service. And the other thing is that it's open. It must be open to taxpayers and the public. So anybody can go and sit in any classroom and see what's going on there. And that's a kind of a Finnish, one form of the Finnish accountability system, that you can go and see what the schools are doing, okay? So somebody asked me about the special education, and if there's any kind of flagship elements in the Finnish school system, it is how our special needs for those children who have particular needs is arranged in this, specifically in this basic school system. This is how the world looks like if you look at what is happening in most parts of the world in terms of how many students there are in the school system proportionally who have some types of special needs. And we have to keep in mind that special needs are defined in a very different way here in the United States than they are in other countries, particularly Finland. We have a very different kind of a concept for special needs in these two countries. So if we want to really understand and speak more about it, we have to look at how special needs are defined. But this is how it looks like in most countries that I know, that the older the children get, the more there is proportionally those who have some type of needs that cannot be served during the normal, regular classroom. This is how the Finnish system looks like. And first kind of a specific thing here is that on a day one, when children come to school in the first grade, when they're 7, the school already knows how many of those kids have some type of particular needs that have to be considered in a day one, okay? Because they come from the daycare or public health system with a kind of a record that will show them what type of needs and support they need. And then we have a big number of our elementary school children in one or the other type of special needs, and then you will see that the proportion of those who have special needs will decline. And then it turns a little bit into increase when they go to junior high or lower secondary school. But this is the kind of a typical thing for the Finnish policy. We have, from the total student population of the basic school, we have about 30% or 32% of our children in special needs, kind of a remedial program. So almost 1/3 of the kids are having some type of additional help, which is about 3 times more than here in the United States and in many other countries as well. And this is about the other aspect of this inclusive education system. Now, from the beginning of this year, we have had a system where also the early childhood and care is under the education administration. Until the end of last year, it was part of the health and social affairs administration. But what you see here clearly is that if you compare the United States and Finland in terms of how the investment goes to different age groups of children, and children is defined as those who are under 18 years old. You are adult when you are 18. So the first is early childhood, which is 0 to 6, and then from 6 to 12 and 12 to 18. And you will see that Finland is investing about 3 times more than the United States proportionally, not in real terms, in these early years, okay? And it's interesting because the Americans know much better than anybody else through your own research from many people that if you want to have the best rate of return to your buck on people, you have to do it during the first 3 years of their lives, or 2 years, okay? So we are doing what you have asked us to do in this way, and I think it's a very smart policy. That's why I think you have to do something to this type of thing before you are able to be in a serious business of closing the achievement gap, because many people here say that the achievement gap between those who have and those who have not here in the United States is so big when the kids come to school that there's very little that the school system can do to close this gap if you don't do it earlier, okay? People often tell me that United States, America, and Finland are so different that you cannot really compare great America with 320 million very diverse people here, different culture and other things, with Finland with the 6 million people, rather homogeneous and small. I agree. I think we are different, but I think the bigger differences come from the how do you deal with certain things like wealth, national wealth, for example. And countries, as you know, are very different in terms of how the wealth is distributed between people, the citizens, okay? And I'll show you how the income inequality, where the more unequal countries will be there on the right-hand side, and the educational performance. I'm using the OECD PISA as a kind of a general proxy here, how they are related. Okay? And if you have read the Spirit Level book or the OECD publications, you probably know what is about to come. This is where the United States is. Many people tell me that this country is more unequal than it has ever been, that the inequality within your nation is at the level of the inequality of the 1780s, 230 years ago, which is not very much progress in this, but America is one of the most unequal countries in the world, and this is where Finland is. And this is what makes us very different. This is more important difference than the size or the culture or the race or many other things, how we deal our people and citizens with the wealth that we have. And America is just a tiny little bit more wealthy as a nation than Finland is, if you look at the per capita proportion of wealth, but you are very different in terms of how you share your wealth between your 320 million people. This is where Canada is, England, and some of the other 20 plus wealthiest nations in the world. And you will see that there's a kind of a negative dependency between the income inequality and learning outcomes in the system. That's, I think this came also from Martin's presentation yesterday. And finally, I think a very important question is that how is Finland doing in other areas of life, other things that are considered important. Education is important, but I'm not looking at education now. I'll have for you a collection of indexes and indicators from different sectors. And if I compare Finnish performance with the United States, all these top 2 lines there are something to do with the business and innovation and technology and governance. Look at the least failed state, that is an American indicator here published every year. Finland is the least failed state, meaning that the system seems to be working in many areas, and the United States is number 19, which indicates that there's something that doesn't work well. In the days like this, it's easy to see that some things don't work. Like getting government up into business is something. But let's take these remaining 6 here, and I think these are some of the things that come much closer to when it comes to children and education, and all of these are important. If you look at this child poverty rate, we are very different there. Child well-being, among 29 countries that UN UNICEF has compared United States is fourth from the bottom, and that makes, again, our countries very different. But look at the political empowerment of women. Yeah? Finland is one of the best countries, top performing countries in terms of how much we give voice and room for women to decide what is important in life. Finland is the best country to be a mother as well. And I think, my opinion is that if you want to improve things here for your children, for pupils and in education, it will be very hard to do unless you have more women in power. Okay? Right? In Finland we have 48% of our members of the parliament are women, and majority of our cabinet ministers at the moment are women as well. And I'm not saying that women are smarter than men. I think we should not go into that. But I'm saying that women often have different priorities. They see things particularly related to children, their happiness and health and education in a little bit different way, yeah? Because of the nature of who they are. And that's why I think we should give them more room. In Finland we have a regulation, for example, that you cannot have any official working group, task force, anything unless you have at least 40% of the other gender there. Whether it's a military or social issues or anything like this, we always need to have at least 40% of the other gender. It's the same thing in Norway, Denmark and Sweden. Okay? So I think this gender issue is particularly important here. So Diane, who is here, Diane is saying that maybe the school systems are failing because the state is failing. And I can say, based on this data, you can say that maybe the Finnish school system is functional and doing well because the state is working well. And this is, it is kind of an interesting, important notion that maybe there is nothing so strange in our education system that would be examined and say that, okay, maybe there are these 5, 6 things that make Finnish system work. Maybe it's the overall system, that the state works well. Almost anything Finland does, not everything, but many things seem to be working well, so why not education? Okay? So that's why I invite all of those who visit Finland to step outside of the classrooms and take a look around what's happening in other parts of the society, because it may help you to understand also the education more. Okay? And because of these things, you often see headlines here in the United States like this, that if you want to fulfill the American dream, you have to move to Finland. And I must tell you that we are not very kind of taken in Finland with the statements like this, because I think it's probably overstating the situation that we have. We have our own issues and problems, as you know. But if your media wants to think like this, you are more than welcome. There was a very nice moratorium. I don't know if you saw this. It was going around in the Twitter. I can tweet it again this afternoon about our president making a statement, a speech in the president's palace in August. So this was a parody, and he was basically saying that we are very happy about all the American delegations in Finland. And we have shown you everything, opened the doors to all the schools and whatever you want to see, and revealed all our secrets to you. And you have been coming now to Finland for the last 10 years, and you haven't done anything. So he said that unless you start to take things seriously and do something, you should stay away. So he said that you better put up or shut up. And it's a kind of a nice parody about this, not only Americans, but visitors in general, that how much they have had an opportunity to see things, how things go, and how little is done around the world. So you can read that if you want to. Let's take a little bit look at what's happening around the world, because I think the one thing that makes Finland interesting is that how different it seems to be from the other countries in terms of how Finland thinks about education and how it tries to improve the quality and equity of the system. And I often say that it's not only that Finland is different, it's almost the opposite of what we have heard here from England, and certainly what you have here in the United States, that many things are going into exactly the opposite direction. Many of you have heard about this. In my book, Finnish Lessons, I write about the global educational reform movement. It's a kind of a nice acronym, GERM. And GERM here for me, it means it's a kind of a virus that makes you gives you an infection, and sometimes you get very ill. In many cases, you just have a flu or a little fever. But in education business globally, we are seeing, witnessing a similar type of thing, that there's a kind of a germ moving around the world that is infecting education systems, and in many cases is not doing good things. Germ can be a good thing as well, but in this case I'm looking at the kind of a problematic aspects of the global movement. And I have had a privilege to work and visit and study about 50 countries' education systems around the world. And this is a result of my work and some of my colleagues who have been working on these things. I'll show you just 4 of these elements of germ, and there's some other symptoms as well, but these are some of the most common things that are very visible if you move from one country to another and just see what's going on there. Competition, as we have heard here, is one of the most visible things. According to the OECD latest PISA study, only 15% of the school principals who filled the survey say that they are not experiencing competition in their work. 85% of school principals within the PISA OECD say that they are doing their daily work under the kind of a spirit of competition, that they feel that they compete against other schools or other systems, okay? So that's why the competition seems to be a kind of a common idea when people ask what is a good way to enhance quality and performance of our education system. Let's design it, let's change the policies so that schools are competing more against one another, or that the districts are having more competition, or even pupils and teachers compete against one another, and quality will improve. Standardization is the other one, and you can see it here in your own country with the Common Core movement. That is a kind of a way towards more standardized system, but this is happening around the world everywhere. The more standards, higher standards, more common expectations for everybody, and people believe that the standardization somehow will enhance the effort and then improve the quality. Test-based accountability is the other one. You know this very well, what it means here. It's kind of a system where standardized testing is used as a means to hold teachers and schools accountable, and this is happening around the world as we speak. Many countries are following your example and the British example in building these accountability systems, and standardized testing is becoming more and more common everywhere. And finally, the school choice. There are people who say that the good way to enhance quality of our school system is to have more choice. You open schools to different providers, and that's why we have charter schools and free schools and private schools and all sorts of other things, so that when parents can choose more from more choices, it will enhance competition and improve the quality. Okay, so this is all very common things. What the germ could look like. This is one of the images that was sent to me by somebody when I was speaking about this. This is a typical Finnish classroom, elementary school or high school classroom nowadays. Okay, so we have different abilities and different individuals with the different expectations there. And if the system is saying that everybody has to do the same thing or take the same exam, what happens often is not that the quality learning will improve, but what happens is what Einstein very beautifully said. That if we do things like this, we are often teaching children that they are dumb, they are stupid. Okay? Unfortunately, this happens in Finland all the time. That kids are not learning science and math and history and these things, but what they learn in school is that they cannot do anything, that they are not good in anything. And I know that this is a common thing around the world, in this country and beyond, where the outcome of education is something different that we expect it to be, okay? So this is how the germ has spread by now. And it started, this is my own view of this, it started in 1988, seriously in England, in the Education Reform Act, went to North America, Australia, New Zealand, and then the rest of the world. And this pretty much looks like the maps that we saw 30 years ago in the summer of 1983. Remember what happened in 1983 in the summer. It was a summer that changed our lives and fused to what we do forever. It's HIV and AIDS, right? That was the summer when it was kind of came into public, and we saw similar types of maps. These infections were there all over the place, and what has been the best way to to fight against HIV, to talk about it, yeah? By far the cheapest and the best, most effective means against HIV and AIDS has been to speak about it publicly and be aware that something like this is going on. And I think we probably have to speak about the germ a little bit more and know what it's doing around the world. It's not making, like we heard here, things that children must be happier and healthier. Germ is not making all the children happier and better learners and things like this. There are places where children are taking their own lives, and not only their own lives, but their parents' lives, because of the pressure on higher standards and more competition and higher stakes testing and things like this. And that's why I think we need to be aware of these things. You know, Finland is still fairly immune, so that's a place where Finland has remained resistant to this germ, but it's knocking our doors as well. You know, there's a little red dot there in Stockholm. You know, Sweden, our western neighbor, has germ because of the policies that they have exercised during the last 20 years, so we have to be very mindful for this. Let's see if we can look at the impact. Many people ask us, so what? Maybe there are education systems where competition, standardization, standardized testing, accountability, you know, driving the reform by these things that you saw has been successful. And basically the only data we can use here is the OECD, from the OECD PISA database. I have selected here the mathematics results from the 2009 study, the 4 studies until 2009 of the 15-year-olds. I can give you science and literacy and it doesn't really change the pattern. So if you look at the 2000, 2003, 6 and 2009 in the countries like United States, England, Canada, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, Netherlands and Sweden that all have had this type of infection at some point, particularly in the 1990s, early 2000s. None of these education systems have been able to do what was promised, that the quality students' learning will improve. Many of them have had a kind of a steady decline. They've been going down, okay? So, of course, this doesn't prove scientifically anything, but it's an interesting question to ask from anybody who is in favor of these germ symptoms, to ask that how do you see this thing? When Finland is here, we have not had a kind of a systematic improvement, but Finland has been getting better systematically already from the fairly high state of math performance in the beginning, okay? So, let's see if I have I should have a video here. Do you want to see a little bit stuff from England? Because I think it's always important to have the students' point of view into these things. And this is one of the interesting ways to listen to what the students have to say in the world where they have been experiencing these types of things. And do we have audio here? No. It should be here. It's embedded in the...
Is it MOD?
Yeah. No, I think it's before.
Oh, it's going to play.
Oops. I cannot show it to you because it's sorry about this. Now I lost everything. Can you get me back to my... But those of you who are in the Twitter, I'll put it in a tweet afterwards. I'm sorry about this. No, we lost everything, yeah. Okay, so let me go to the Finnish response from Finland that we have. Right here. Okay. So if you ask a question that what Finland has done in during this movement of global education reform movement, these are some of the responses that we have had. Our education policies and practice as well is emphasizing much more collaboration, cooperation, networking, sharing, doing things together within the school system, the entire education system, than competition. So in Finland, we do not really believe that competition is the best idea to do what we want to do. And in my country, we have equity and quality or excellence, as you call it here, having an equal importance in our education policies. Actually, the education policies are today still run more by need to enhance and guarantee equity and equality in the system. So that's why collaboration and cooperation are very important aspects of this. If you ask what does it mean in practice, give me an example of how an education policy that it tries to prevent schools from competition or teachers from competition, how does it look like? One thing that we do, and we have done for a long time now, is that we are not allowing schools to grade their students, pupils, before the 5th grade, when they are about 12 years old. Which means that the school, when they're giving a report card for the student or their parents, the report card must not contain numbers or letters or anything like this that would enable them to compete and compare to one another. So it has to be a descriptive feedback, and we also always include a kind of an oral communication with parents as part of the evaluation. So this is taking away this competition within the classrooms when the students' performance is not transformed into numeric comparable units. Customization is the choice that we have before standardization. Of course, we have standardization in Finland. We standardize two things very carefully. One is teacher preparation. We have 8 research universities, but only one program. Okay? Here in the United States, you have 1,500 different teacher preparation programs that are not standardized at all to one another. The other thing we standardize is the school funding. So we are very clear that and careful that all the schools in Finland have to be funded using the same criteria, that is basically providing more resources to those schools who have more needs, more immigrant background children or unemployed parents living in the community or special needs kids or something like this. But other than that, we are not really standardizing too much of anything. Customization here means, for example, that we have, as you know, that every school in Finland is responsible for designing their own curriculum, set their own standards according to the national framework that provides a kind of a guideline how to do that. Special education, this high rate of special needs students in our school system means that it has to be very individualized. I often say that's why Finnish school system is the most individualized education system in the world, because it's run by this individual approach. Those special needs kids, they often have their own personal study plan that is built based on the school curriculum, that they can study their own things. And our entire high school is fully personalized, where students can decide and build their own programs based on the menus of alternatives offered by the school. But of course there is again a national criteria what they have to study, but the students can decide and build on their personal programs. In Finland we often say that standardization is the worst enemy of creativity. And anybody who wants to have more creativity in the school system has to ask this question twice. How do you deal with the standardization? More standardization is always narrowing the room and space for creativity, risk-taking creativity, innovation. So that's how Finns often think. We trust our schools and trust our teachers, and this is a kind of a thing that is very difficult to explain how you do that. We have 90% of Finnish taxpayers trust the public school system in Finland. In the United States, the figure is 29%. Yeah? Here you trust much more on your own school, in your own neighborhood, but when you ask people that how much you trust the school system, it's very low here. Almost everybody in Finland do trust their school system, and that's why it's a big difference in terms of how to run the school. So we can rely much more than in many other places on teachers and schools and their judgment, for example, students' assessment. That's why we don't need to have the standardized testing system that many other countries have, that is testing all the time throughout their school. Okay? And responsibility is the word. We don't really have a word accountability at all in Finland in education discourse. It's more used in economy and accounting and business, but not in education. In Finnish lessons, if you have a chance to read that, I'm offering you a definition for accountability in education in Finland. And for Finns, accountability is something that is left when responsibility is taken away. So accountability is what is there when responsibility is subtracted. And by the way, this was confirmed by several visitors from the United States when they were observing our schools, and they saw how teaching children to be responsible for their own behavior and learning in Finnish schools is a kind of a typical feature from one classroom to another. And the more accountability you experience, I'm just repeating what I was hearing from some of the visitors, the more accountability you experience in the school, less responsibility there will be room for children, because the accountability is defined in a different way. And then the fourth one is equity, equity in education. And this is again something that our government policies are putting as a driver in our education reforms and development. Equity first, and choice, parental choice is the next. We have a choice for parents of schools, but they can choose between one public school and the other. Okay, so that's why the government is trying to invest in equity and making sure that this will be the kind of a driver of the enhancement and improvement of the system. So let me then turn and offer you three different aspects of what is often included when people think about how Finland has been driving or building the system that we have had now for the last 40 years. So let's look at some of those things. The first one is the equity issue. And my definition for equity is that it's a strength of the relationship between children's family background, socioeconomic background, and their performance in school. And this is something that Martin is there. Martin was speaking very much about this, and you used a little bit different concept, but I think we are talking about the similar type of thing. And as you said yesterday, that everywhere around the world, the thing is the same, that the lower the socioeconomic status or parents' education or their occupations or wealth is, the more likely it is that these children will not do better in the school than those who are coming in from more advanced families. So this figure means that the equity improves when you go to the right in the image. So more equitable school systems you will find them on the right of the figure, and more inequitable systems, in other words, where the relationship between the family background and the educational performance is stronger, on the left-hand side here. And if I give you the average again, I'm using here the OECD average because the data is coming very much from that study. This will show you on the vertical side the quality of learning outcomes upper there, and the poorer learning outcomes nationally are then there in the lower part. So where would you place your own country? And this is a crazy question because there's no such thing as American education system. Yeah? But the OECD is still, combining all these 50 different systems and 15,000 different local education systems into one. So it doesn't really make justice to the United States. If we have all the 50 states there, you will see them in a different parts of the map. But where would you put if we are now, using
Greater equity being to the right.
There's more equity, more equitable systems are on the right. Okay, so it means that the relationship is weaker there. So you would put in the left and a little bit.
Pasi, what is lower left quadrant?
I'm using the OECD equity index.
Equity is test scores, you mean?
No, the parents.
Okay.
Yeah, the family background. Okay. So this is how the OECD is rating the United States, and for me, I always hear this from people here. They think that the equity in the United States would be much worse. But this is, and this gets back to what Martin was saying yesterday, that there's something fundamentally right and strong in the US public school system that is able to deal with these huge inequalities that you saw earlier in the society in a way that the system is very close to the OECD average in terms of equity. So in other words, the public school system, the school system here is able to somehow cope and deal with the inequalities and diversities in a very strong way, okay? Because there are many countries that have much worse equity score. This is where England is. I think it's the UK as well, so that's England. Sweden and some of the other OECD, most of the OECD countries are there. An interesting notion here is that there seems to be somehow kind of a link between the equity and excellence, or equity and quality here, because all these flags there, they're almost like sitting in a stairway steps. And if South Korea, Canada, and Japan, if they are in heaven, let's call this heaven, where the equity and excellence meet, then we can call this a stairway to heaven. Remember this song? You know, Led Zeppelin song, Stairway to Heaven. But where is Finland? You know, there's one outlier, this red and white thing there in the top, with the strong excellence or quality, but relatively weak equity. That's Singapore. And that's why Singapore is not always included in these high-performing systems, because they have an issue. They have an issue with equality as well, but also with equity. Okay. But where is Finland? Can you find Finnish flag there? You know how Finnish flag looks like? Yes, you do? I'll give you a hint. It's the most beautiful flag in the world. Doesn't help you too much. This is where Finland was in 1972, when we started to build this system that you saw earlier, and when we started to insist that everybody, all the children from different social backgrounds, have to come into the same similar type of school and have a socially mixed classrooms and more diversity. And if you look at this most beautiful flag in the world, you will see what has been the Finnish way, or the pathway of Finland during the last 30 or 40 years. And you probably can guess that somehow Finland will get to the heaven. Yeah? But it's still the secret which way to go. And this has been the Finnish way. Right. Wow. You can give a little hand to Finland if you think that it was a good achievement. But you know, there are many ways to do that, and we had the first 20 years, the first 2 decades, starting from early 1970s. It was really the time when we were heavily investing in equity and building the system of special needs education, early childhood, fair school funding, and school meals and health services. We have doctors and nurses and dentists and all these things available every day in every school, everywhere in Finland, still now. So this equity was built during the first 20 years, because we thought that if you have a lot of child poverty like we had in the early 1970s, we probably had about 20% of our children coming from poor families. Most of the Finns were living in a countryside and getting their living from the land. So we didn't even think that we can achieve our goals to have great school for everybody without we embed the health and well-being services as part of the work of every school, and being complementary to everybody, okay? So that's how it looks like now, and when Martin was speaking about the OECD PISA study yesterday, I think for me, probably the most significant part of the OECD data and the work that OECD has been doing is related to these other things than just the learning outcomes. Of course, that's important because you can compare things, but this attitude information, and particularly the equity, the kind of a finding that equity and quality are somehow going together is a very important thing if the OECD data is correct. It's interesting, you know, one of the kind of intellectual questions is that why Finland and the other Nordic countries are so different, although the societies and countries are very similar in many other ways. The social values and the size and the demographics and all these things are fairly close to one another. Even our history is the same. We speak the same languages there. But the educational performance is very different there. One of the answers often is that Finland has been more systematic during the last 40 years to, you know, stick with this goal of building a good school system for everybody. Sweden, particularly Sweden, but Norway and Denmark have been much more kind of willing to experiment all sorts of things, and with the different political powers, they have often seen very different education reforms. In Finland, we haven't really deviated from this course of equity and equality in education during the last 40 years. That's one thing. The second thing is that somehow we have been able to build the teacher system where teaching is seen as one of the most fashionable professions now in Finland, whereas in Norway, for example, anybody who wants to go to teacher education can do that. In Sweden, they cannot get enough young people, young Swedes, to enroll in the teacher education programs, although everything is free and paid for them. Okay? And in Finland, as you will see, we have a very different system. Okay? My second one is the less is better or less is more. Somebody mentioned this in the morning here. And I'll just show you a couple of things to take away the kind of idea that maybe Finland is doing so well because we do more of everything, okay? But it's the other way around, that we seem to be doing less of many things that people often try to increase when the things are working. This is from the OECD Education at a Glance, and it's showing you the middle school or junior high school teachers' typical teaching load in different countries, okay? I'll take the other countries away there so you can compare the United States and Finland, and I know that this is again one of those OECD statistics that are not completely coherent from one country to another, but whatever it is, this shows you that in Finland, teachers have relatively less required teaching instruction time every day or every week than in many other countries, which means that if the US figure is right, it means that every day Finnish teachers have about 2 hours less time that they need to spend with students or classrooms, which is again time that they can spend on some other things. It's the same thing with the students. If you think that Finnish students have very long school days and school year has many days, that's again wrong. Finland actually has the least number of formal compulsory instruction hours of all the OECD countries at the moment. Let me take these things away, and the kind of average typical US state would have about 7,000 or 7,500 hours, cumulative hours between 7 and 14. So we are looking at the 8 years of children education. And this would, this difference there between the United States and Finland corresponds to about 2 years less formal instruction, formal learning in Finland than here in the United States. Okay? So it's a big difference. We go to school in Finland when we are 7, kind of a school type instruction and learning starts at the age of 7, and in the United States it's 1 year earlier, I guess. So there's another year here coming.
What time of day does your high school start?
Well, high school is a completely different thing. And remember, I said that high school is a personalized thing. So we have, if somebody wants to study 8 hours a day, you can do it 8 hours a day. If somebody wants to study 3 hours a day or 2 hours a day, you can do it 2 hours a day. So I cannot really say we don't have any measures or statistics about this high school.
But what time of the morning? Does school begin at 7:30 in the morning?
No.
9 o'clock in the morning?
Normally 8:30.
8.
That's the earliest, yeah. Primary schools, if you look at let's say second grade kids, they normally go to school at 9 and they go home at 1. Okay? Or they can stay in the school if the school is offering some afternoon activities. But it's a fairly short school day. And one of the things that I do not see here, particularly here in the United States, is that if I walk around here in Washington, D.C., 2 or 3 o'clock any afternoon during the day, I never see any kids here. If you go to Helsinki or any other city, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, particularly now when we had a beautiful September, the city is full of kids. 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, they walk with their friends and alone in the parks and outside after school. So it's a very different thing. So that's why if you ask what the kids are doing after school, they do whatever they want to do. They can go home, or they can hang around in the city, or they can play, or stay in the school, or go home, or whatever they do. It's a very different culture, okay? So we have much less homework. We don't have any homework standard, and we do homework in a primary and middle school. There's a lot of homework in a high school. Again, it's a different thing because it depends on the individuals. But we do not really believe in the kind of a power of magic of homework. Normally the first 3 or 4 grades in Finland are without any homework at all. Most of the primary schools, they have a practice that they try to keep children away from homework so that they do whatever they need to do during the school day, so that there's evenings and free time they could do at home what they want to do. Of course, we don't have any test preparation because we don't have any external high-stake standardized tests. You know, all of this testing, we have a lot of tests in the school, and there's much more data in Finnish schools than your schools here have, but it's mostly collected by teachers and schools themselves. But there's no test preparation, there's not really a kind of a focus on performance in these tests anywhere before the end of the high school, where we have the one and only high-stake standardized school living examination at the age of 18 or 19. And we have no after-school tuition. Martin was referring yesterday, when we speak about the Shanghai and South Korea and Singapore, how common it is that children go, even little kids will go to the evening school that parents pay after they have finished their normal school day. We don't have any private companies or any practice, anything like this, that children would do after the school system. And then finally, the third one is about teachers. I couldn't leave this floor without saying a couple of things about Finnish teachers and teacher education. First of all, I do not think that teachers would do everything. I think teachers are important, but even if the best teachers in the world that happen to be in Finland, because they all have a research-based scientific master's degree, even if we bring all these teachers here in the United States, they wouldn't be able to do what you think they would be able to do because of the other things that are kind of changing the nature of their work in a way that is not making things happen. Particularly, they wouldn't be able to do away the negative impact of poverty that you will hear later today. Okay? I wrote a little column for Washington Post a couple of months ago called "What if Finland's Great Teachers Taught in US Schools?" You can find it on my website. And I do a little kind of an intellectual exercise and experiment in that. I'm asking my reader, what do you think would happen if the best teachers in the world from Finland would be delivered in one of the states here in the United States? And I pick up the state of Indiana. Is there anybody from Indiana here? Okay. So I just look at the US map and took something that is about a similar size than Finland. And then we would bring these teachers from Indiana to Finland, and let's forget the language for a while. Let's assume that they all understand whatever language is needed there. And then we ask these teachers to work 5 years in these new systems, in their new schools and new cultures and new policies and new requirements, whatever they are. Okay? And the question is that what do you think would happen in the state of Indiana in the test course after 5 years? My answer is nothing much. Things would remain about the same. Okay? So if somebody thinks that these Finnish magical teachers would double the test course in 5 years, I think you're wrong. First of all, I think about half of those Finnish teachers would leave their jobs before the end of the 5th year, because they would say things like, I was not prepared to do things like this. I was prepared to work with other colleagues and do things that are important for kids, okay? And many other things. But I don't think that it's about the teacher itself. Question B is, what do you think would happen to Finland in the PISA 2015 or 18? Nothing much. Finland would probably continue declining a little bit, but not because of the Indiana teachers' quality. It's for other reasons. So if you think that I'm wrong with this, please write to me, because I want to hear the arguments. But I think teachers are important, and for Finland they're particularly important, but they're important because we are able to do. We can rely on teachers in planning, setting their standards, thinking about deciding what is good for children in their own communities and schools. We can also rely on teachers in assessing students, giving their grades, communicating these with the community and decision makers and parents. You cannot do if teachers are not trained to do that. And I know that many teacher preparation programs here in the United States don't include any more student assessment elements because it's not part of the teacher's work. It's something that is done by other people outside of the school. But we have an extensive element in our teacher master's degree program on evaluation and assessment techniques. Okay? This is my niece, my sister's daughter, and when she was 19, she was leaving the school, and she gave me a call and said that she decided to become a primary school teacher. And She asked me what to do. And I said that, you're a perfect candidate. You're a straight A girl. You're doing all the subjects, academics and music and sports and everything else. You just go there and be yourself. And master's degree in Finland requires normally about 5 to 6 year full-time study. They have to do a thesis, research, methodology, all these things, just like I did in math or anybody does in law or any other field in the university. So she did that, and 3 months later she called me and she was desperately crying. And she said that they didn't take me. And I said to her that, almost any other country in the world, you have been selected without anything. Just come if you are really interested to become a primary school teacher. We have a place for you, but not in Finland. Remember, we have 8 research universities. They have 1 program, and you have to successfully pass the entrance examination before you are accepted there. Not like in Norway, where anybody can go. In Finland, we are selected, okay? So I asked her to tell me what happened there. And she said that the first part of the examination was fairly easy, that they have to read a book about 200 pages, normally consists of about 6 or 7 scientific articles that have been published previously in scientific journals, and they have to learn them by heart. So the questions cover all these articles, and you have to really understand what it is. One year there was one of my articles included in the book, and of course I wanted to see what are the questions that they're asking from the stuff that I was writing, and I tried to answer them, and I couldn't get everything right. Because I couldn't understand the question, I couldn't remember exactly what I was writing, okay? So but she was successful with this because she was a good student. She had learned to, learn how to learn this type of material. Second part of the examination, where they selected the best candidates from this first one, was a kind of a team task where the 4 or 5 candidates were asked to design an activity for kids and then perform it in the front of the panel. And the panel was watching how they communicate, how they work together, how creative their ideas are, just like sometimes in a job, psychological tests. And the third one after that was a personal interview. And so every single candidate in Finland is individually interviewed before they are accepted to the teacher training program. Yeah? Not like in Norway, where anybody can go. Okay? So I knew that the problem for her was probably in this final interview, that there was something that she was not able to deal with successfully. So I said, so what was the most difficult thing that they asked you? And she said, the question that I didn't quite prepare myself was that when they asked me that, so why did you come here? Because with your grades and your diploma and what you have learned, you could be a lawyer or doctor or economist or anything you like, but why you are here? Why primary school teacher? And I said, so what did you tell them? And she said, I said that my uncle is a teacher. And my mother and grandfather, and there are many people who are teachers in a family, so it's like a family thing, And then somebody said, is there anything you would like to add to this? And she said, yes, of course. And then she made the cardinal mistake. And she said, I love children. And it's a wrong answer. It means that I really don't know. And she didn't really know. She didn't have a kind of a deeper moral understanding of why she wants to do that. So she asked me, she was very disappointed with herself, and she asked me that, so what should I do? Because I really want to be a teacher. I want to go there. And I said that if you really want to do that, go and look for a teaching assistant position for a year. So work in a primary school with somebody, a qualified teacher there, and see how it looks like. Okay? Try to understand what teachers do and what the school is, and from the other side. And then if you apply again and you get to the final interview, talk about that, which she did, and she was accepted, and now she graduated last year. And she will be one of those teachers in Finland who is a 5-star teacher, and she will be there for life, because she really knows that this is what she wants to do. If you think that I'm just trying to make you emotional, shed a little tear, I can tell you that this, there were thousands of people like her this summer in these 8 master's degree programs in primary school teacher education. We accepted about 750 students this summer, and we had 8,500 candidates. Okay? So out of these 8,500 people, our 8 universities were selecting 750 people like my niece. Okay? Okay? All of them are there because they really want to be there. Everybody can explain why I want to be teacher rather than anybody else. All of them will graduate, and most of them will go to teach and stay there for a long time. Okay? And this is what makes Finland different, right?
Pasi, these are applicants out of high school, or do they have a college degree and they're applying for the master's program?
No, in Finland we don't have the system that you have here. That you go to college and then you go to continue your studies in a university.
Yes.
In Finland what they do is that these are, I'm talking about those kids who graduate from high school, and when you apply to this program, it's a directly 5 or 6 year master's program. We don't actually have undergraduate degree at all because there's nothing you can do with a primary school teacher undergraduate degree. You cannot work with this one. So they automatically, they study education as their major, okay? And they study education for 5 or 6 years. They do their thesis on education. And then they have their minor subjects. Normally, they have to select these subjects from the set of primary school curriculum subjects, math and physical education, or music and English, or something like this. So they have to have 2 minors there. So it's automatically a 5 or 6 year program. We don't have, this system is different in Finland.
So there's nothing like a liberal arts degree, undergraduate degree then?
No. And that's, it's a big difference because those graduates from teacher education programs, they have studied education as a major subject. Or 5 or so. 5 years is a kind of a theoretical. Very few can do it in 5 years. So it's normally about 6. I think she did it in 6 or 7 years. These are the elements of the Finnish teacher education system, and I agree that it's not only the kind of academic advanced degree that is making a difference. There are studies here in the United States that show that the master's degree really doesn't make too much difference in a student's performance in the school. But then we need to understand that there are different types of master's degrees that we cannot really conclude anything like this without looking at what type of degrees they are. So we have an advanced university preparation for all our teachers. You cannot teach in Finland anywhere unless you have at least master's degree from one of the research universities. They are research-based academic degrees, exactly the same way as in any other field. So the master's thesis, for example, for primary school teacher student must comply with the similar rigor and standards than in any other faculty in the research university. Okay? And the university is very strict about this, that they are not allowing any deviation from this quality. We have a departmental structure for teacher education, which is a very uncommon around the world, that we have a department of teacher education in these 8 universities, and they are departments like any other departments, where there are professors and researchers and lecturers and resources and facilities like any other department. It's a very important thing. And then we have the clinical teacher training schools that not many countries actually have. Just like you have your medical hospitals in the universities here. George Washington University has a teaching hospital. We have a teacher training schools, clinical training schools in all of the universities preparing teachers where the practical training will take place. It's a very important element of the Finnish system. Okay? And often when people speak about the teacher quality, they refer to human capital, what teachers know and what they are able to do. But in Finland this is a different thing because this is just one of the 3 dimensions of our quality of our teachers. Okay? So that's why I think we need to be very careful with this one. There's the other dimension in Finland is a social capital. And this is part of the teacher education in Finland. When we prepare our teachers, that we try to prepare individuals who are able to work together with other professionals and who understand what is the value of social connections and networks and cooperation. So the social capital is the other one, and then the third one is the decisional capital. That refers to something that gives you more professional capital, if you wish, if you can be engaged and participate in the decision-making regarding your own work and whatever you do in the school. And, this picture is very different if we look at what was the situation in Finland 30 years ago with this professional capital. That is a concept that sometimes is used in this. This is amount of professional capital that we had in our school system 30 years ago. Because we had fairly little social capital, the system was not designed to, so that people will work together and schools are connected and learn from one another, and there was a very little decisional capital because everything was decided from the top. And this is how it looks like now. that we have only improved very little the human capital, in other words, what the teachers know and they are able to do, but we have made more progress in social capital and particularly decisional capital through the autonomy in the schools. So that's why the professional capital today within our school system is much larger than before. So that's why when we speak about teacher quality in Finland, we speak about different things that in many other countries where teacher quality looks at the individual teachers' training and what they can do alone as a teachers or leaders. And it's the same thing with the school leaders principles in Finland. Now, this is my last thing for you, and I have 4 lessons. I always try to kind of customize some of these things that I think would be relevant for you and particular audience. I think my first lesson to you is that you can agree or disagree is that I think this country could do with much less standardized testing that you have currently by trusting schools and teachers more and replacing some of these standardized assessments and tests with the more intelligent, smarter ways to do. You know, this is one of these things that I, as an external visitor here in the United States, see the most difficult to fit into this American system is that you have all the knowledge and understanding and expertise and all these things to have much more smarter assessment testing system, but you are still relying and building on a system that doesn't really fit onto what you would like to be here. So that's, I think, one thing. Building trust is a difficult thing. You cannot do it by just issuing policy. You have to do certain things like we have done as an example. Teacher quality is about professional capital, as I said before. I think when we talk about teacher quality, we should also look at this social capital and decisional capital. And this is exactly why this Indiana-Finland example is, as I argued, that it is. Excellence comes with equity, not with choice. Again, this is the OECD lesson, but it's a particular lesson from Finland. That in the Finnish high performance in the international studies is because equity. It's because we have systematically built a system that is helping each and every child to be successful, rather than building a system that is driven by parental choice or other things. And then I think we need more evidence-based reforms and less experimentation with children. And what you are doing now with the Common Core is one of these things that I see as an external visitor. That is an experiment that nobody has tried before, and it includes tens of millions of children, and nobody knows whether this is going to work or not. And you are very good in this type of thing. Race to the Top was one of them, and No Child Left Behind is one of them, and many of these things. And you know this again better than anybody else in the world. That if you want to be successful with these things, don't experiment with the important things like kids and their lives. And I will end, as I always do. Some people have been asking that, so where's your son? And some of you met Otto, right? He's now 18 months old, and you know, it still happens the same thing. If you look at those great blue eyes, that when I was leaving home a couple of days ago to come here, I go to my son like any good father would. And you know, I try to find an excuse why I have to go. And before I say anything, he looks at me with his blue eyes and says, "Daddy, why do you have to go to Washington, D.C. to talk to these superintendents there? You just stay home with me and Mommy because we need you more than them." And you know, in Finland, kids are so smart that they can speak fluently when they are about 8 months old. In this picture, Otto is about 2 months old. But you know, my question to you is that what would you say if you were in the same situation? You have to say something. You just cannot say that, shut up, take your luggage and go. Well, I say, you know what I normally say to Otto is that, you know, when you were born in April 17th, 2012, there were 350,000 children who are your sisters and brothers who have the same birthday. They were born in the same day with you around the world. Many of them are in the developing countries. And the next day, 350,000 more. And the day after, another 350,000 kids. And they're all your sisters and brothers, Otto. And I have to go because if I don't go, I'm afraid that they do not have a school that your mother and I had. Or that they will have a school that is not, you know, really caring about your happiness and health and well-being, but they care about other things. And you probably don't have the time to play anymore, because play is taken out of so many schools around the world, and children, when they are 3, will be trained and prepared for their first standardized test when they are 4 years old. And before I can say anything else, he looks at me with these great blue eyes and said that, okay, go to Washington, D.C., and tell these people that children must play and come back home safely. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a few questions, and I'm going to start off and first with a comment. I share Otto's birthday.
You do?
Yes, I do.
I was supposed to ask because there's almost always somebody who has a birthday at the same day in the autumn.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I feel so honored.
It's a great day.
It is a great day.
Yeah, but it was a couple of years earlier than Otto, right?
Well, let's see. Well, my first question, on a more serious note, actually, I think I need you to expand on something, is in reference to the shortened day for students compared with the students in the United States versus the teacher day in Finland. And the reason I bring this up is in the United States, our teachers work very, very hard, and contracts or whatever it might be allow them a 30-minute duty-free preparation time, which they usually spend just trying to maybe take care of personal needs and regroup for a little bit before the next group of students comes before them or until their students come back from lunch. I'd like you to comment on how the teacher's day is different in Finland, if you would.
Yeah, well, first of all, teachers in Finland, when we talk about basic school, most of them are paid according to the time that they teach. So in theory, you only need to be in the school when you have lessons there. And when I was teaching math and science for many years in Finland, and my typical school day was about 4 45-minute lessons a day. Okay? So when I've done my teaching, I can do whatever I want to do. But now it's a little bit different thing now, because our leadership, our school principals, they try to create their schools so that teachers would spend more time there, even though they are not paid. If you ask the union, 96% of our teachers are unionized. If you ask about unions' opinion, they're not very happy with this thing. But they are not objecting. They said it's up to the school and teachers. If they decide to do this thing as part of their preparation, they can do this. But it's very difficult to say how the typical school day looks like. But if I have to say something, I would say that typically teachers go to school around 9 o'clock, 8:30 or 9. They do their 3 or 4 or 5 45-minute lessons, and they may stay there for an hour or 2 afterwards. Some of them, they want to do the preparation in the school. And I think we have probably better teachers' lounges and facilities in general in Finland than here in the United States. So teachers will have their own space to work on, and so that's why I think it's a fairly common that teachers will spend a little bit time there. And it's also very common that when the schools are when they have the curriculum revision going on, and it regularly happens in a school, that you see all the teachers there on a weekly basis spending several hours together to work on these things.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There's a question in the back.
Pasi, thanks for your great talk. I want to ask you 2 short questions. The first one has to do with this Finland climbing the stairs to heaven. If you have any sort of sense of how much of that was due to reducing income inequality or reduction of poverty, you said it started out with 20% poverty, and as you grew, and how much was due? I couldn't quite read with my aging eyes what the title was of that lower axis.
Right.
But it seemed to me some sort of ratio of test scores versus inequality, social inequality.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So how much was the numerator and how much was the denominator? second question is, I meant to ask you this privately, but I forgot, so I'll ask you publicly. How do you explain the difference in the PISA, Finland stands on a PISA versus where Finland stands on the TIMSS?
Right, okay. Fair thing. I think, I made a reference to other Nordic Scandinavian countries. Sweden, Norway, and Denmark are very similar also in terms of, as you saw there, in terms of the income inequality. So we can say that all the Nordic countries are equal. So you cannot really say that the reducing or controlling the income inequality in the country would be a kind of a guarantee to better educational success, because the other Scandinavian countries have not been able to, improve their performance from this axis. So I think that we have to look at some of these things, particularly from within this equity project in Finland and the other Scandinavian countries. Interesting thing is that if you travel around the Scandinavian Nordic countries, they will all speak to you about the same things: special education, early childhood, healthcare in the school meals, and these things everywhere. But one thing that we do very differently is the special needs program. For example, between Norway and Finland, practically Norway doesn't have a special needs education program at all. It's done in a very different way. And that's why, if I have to say one thing for you, Martin, I would say that Finland has been doing significantly better in particularly this quality access than the other Nordic countries, because of our approach to kind of an individualized approach to special needs program education for the last 40 years. I'm very proud of how Finland has designed and redesigned the special needs thing there, and I think that's one thing. When it comes to the TIMSS and PISA, as you were very well describing yesterday, the differences between the TIMSS, kind of a nature of different measurements of TIMSS and PISA, I think we have, far before the PISA came along, the Finnish curriculum in early 1990s, and our textbooks and teacher education, particularly science and math. I was a science and math teacher educator too, and I remember how we were focusing on the things that we found 10 years later in the PISA test, that is focusing more on applying knowledge, problem solving, kind of a complex things, sets of problems that you have to understand first before you can answer this thing. And if you look at the PISA items, many of them are, if you cannot read properly, or if you haven't been prepared to understand the physics question, you cannot really do anything if you don't know how to make sense out of the question. And we had been doing those things for at least 10 years, 15 years before the PISA came along. That many of the school-based tests and assessments looked very much like the PISA test looked like 15 years later. So that's why I think that we, in Finland, our pedagogy and curriculum and the whole kind of a ethos of instruction was closer to the kind of a PISA type of philosophy than the TIMSS. Okay, so that's, I think, explains, particularly in math and science, these differences there.
Question right there in the middle, Paul.
Thank you. I'm very impressed with the quality of teacher education in Finland. And based on my life experience, so much of the success we have depends upon the quality of the teachers that come into our classroom. So I'm just very struck by why you would say that teachers from Indiana coming into Finland would have no effect. Everything that I've learned, say, would have a huge adverse effect. And if it didn't, then why bother investing in teacher education?
Well, my argument is, when I say that nothing significant change would probably not happen with the American teachers in Finland, is because our school culture is probably much more supportive in terms of the kind of a collegial way compared to here. And it's a very common thing in Finland that and when I was in the school, I remember this vividly, that if there was a colleague who was not able to do for any reason what he or she was supposed to do, the first thing that happened was that we tried to help him or her. Because there was no kind of a sense of competition or anything like this. So that's why I'm saying that probably if there were teachers in this population of Indiana teachers who went to Finland, probably the most common thing that would have happened, if they were not able to do things as they were supposed to do, that they would have received help from the leadership and from the colleagues in the school. I'm not saying that this would not happen here, but I would guess that it would be more difficult to see those things as part of the culture of the school. You know this much better than I do, but this is what people have been telling me. But teachers are important. As I said, that having good teachers is a kind of a necessary condition. But you cannot, as many people are saying here, that if only we had teachers like Finland, things would be fine. I don't think that this is true, because you also need to look at particularly the outer school factors like poverty and many other things, but also what's happening in the school. Everybody, I think, in this room knows that about 2/3 of the variation that explains students' performance learning in the school comes from outer school factors, and out of that 1/3, only part of it is related to teachers. Maybe at best half of the 1/3 is about teachers. So we are often highly kind of overestimating the power that one individual teacher would have. But let me underline once again, teachers are very important, and your system is doing better if you have better teachers there, but you cannot simply argue that we can solve all the problems here in the United States, many parts of the country here, just by having better teachers. I don't think that this is true.
Okay, we have a question right there, if you could.
Yeah, I'm curious about, so when I was in Finland, the head of your teachers union told the story that he was in Washington and Arnie Duncan said to him, "What should I learn about Finland?" And his response was, "You've got it all wrong." And I'm wondering what the reaction has been of policymakers in this country that you've talked to with this presentation, especially those who kind of are supportive of race to the top and everything else that's going on.
It's a very good question. You know what I've seen here, and this is my very personal kind of a view to your question, is that when I lived in the United States here, I moved away in 2007. It was a very difficult time of the previous administration when there was, like Martin was saying, that there was not really any collaboration or interest into what's happening in other parts of the world. And ever since, I think that I can see much more, first of all, interest around the United States. I've been traveling here now in about 35 different states, all across this beautiful country, and I have seen a kind of an increasing interest in not only in Finland, but what's happening in Canada and Europe and Latin America, different countries, and that's probably more important, more positive kind of observation than saying that Arnie Duncan or some individual would be interested in these things. And there are also kind of interesting experiments beginning here, like for example in Texas and Georgia, Minnesota and somewhere else, where people try to take some of the ideas from Finland, not the Finnish kind of a Finnish system, but some of the little things like giving children a recess, 15 minutes break between the subjects, giving them good food in the school, and having physical education every week in the schedule, that like Finland is doing, and having a little bit less, converting some of the standardized tests into something else. And I think that those are the signs that I think will be more important than any individual politicians. But there's a lot of interest now. I was yesterday in the Senate meeting one of the senators. I've actually met several of the US senators now because they want to hear what Finland is doing. And in a way, I agree that most people get it wrong. So if you hear people speaking about Finland, most people somehow they get it wrong. Because I sometimes get Finland wrong. So education is so complicated issue to understand. But as long as we are in the business of learning from one another, as long as we treat Finland as an inspiration rather than model to be imitated, I think we are closer to the truth than being wrong with these things.
Pasi, we have time for one more question, and I see a hand in the back.
Mathematics.
Yes, mathematics.
All right.
And shoes. Dr. Sahlberg, I wanted to comment on your Indiana analogy. I had the great pleasure of spending 25 years in the great state of Indiana. Your analogy is right on target, and I would like to extend the thinking slightly to the point that the hardworking, selfless teachers in Evansville, Indianapolis, and Gary would feel like they had died and gone to heaven in Helsinki.
Right. Let me close this wonderful session by, first of all, thanking you, everybody, for listening to what I have to say. But a little anecdote about this Indiana thing. This little story was published in the mid-May this year. And if you want to read, I invite you to read this story on my website or Washington Post website. About 6 weeks later, I got a phone call from Washington, D.C., our embassy here, and somebody called and said that there was a delivery to you that looks like a fruit basket. But there seems to be wine and fruit and biscuits and honey and all these things, a big thing. And that there's a card saying your name. And I said, could you, this woman was there on the phone. I said, could you open this card and read from where it is? So she opened the envelope and said that it says that this is a greetings and thanks from the teachers of Indiana. So thank you.
We have some coffee upstairs, and then